Hi there and welcome to this video where we will see how to configure webhooks in Testkube. It's a three-step process. The first step is creating a test workflow. The second step is actually configuring the application where you want the notifications to be sent. And the third step is creating a webhook in Testkube. So in this example, what we'll do is we'll create a curl test workflow, a simple curl test workflow. And then we will configure Slack, which is a very popular collaboration and interactive tool for receiving the webhook notifications. We'll also configure Grafana endpoint as an incident management tool where the alerts would be sent. So in terms of use case, whenever the curl test fails, we will see an alert in Grafana, and whenever the curl test pass, we will see a notification in our Slack channel. So let us go ahead and create the curl test to start. So to create a curl test, navigate to your Testkube dashboard and click on workflows. From here, you can click on add a new test workflow button, and it presents you with a lot of options to create a test workflow. We'll do it using a example, and here we will choose curl. So if you see, it gives me a sample output, a sample spec file for the curl test. In this case, we would be modifying the test a little. So I will be using a different YAML file over here. So now if you see, what I've done is the name of the test is curl webhook workflow. I have defined the image, and in terms of the command, I'm actually testing a URL and I'm checking if the response is 200 or not. So in this case, if the response is HTTP 200, the test will pass. If it is not 200, it will fail, and I'll just click on create and run. So with this, our test workflow is successfully created and it will be executed for the very first time. So all I have to do is it's executing, and I go to run curl and I see that it has configured what is required and it has passed successfully. It has not written anything over here. So our test is passing completely. Now let us go ahead and start configuring Slack, and we will do that by first creating a channel in Slack, then creating a Slack application, then configuring an incoming webhook in Slack, and then coming back here to configure the webhook in Testkube. So let us go ahead and create a new channel in Slack. So open your Slack, click on add channel, create a new channel, and let's give it a name. So I give it as Testkube webhook, and I'll keep it as a private channel and click on create. So it'll ask whether you want to add people. I'll just skip for now. So if you see, I have created a channel which is called Testkube webhook, and this is what we are going to configure in our Slack app as well as the Testkube webhook. Let us go ahead and create a Slack application. In this case, navigate to api.slack.com/apps, and this is where you can create an application. Click on create new, and it will ask you how you want to create your application. Do you want to create it from a manifest, or do you want to create it from scratch? Let us click from scratch, and then it will ask you for a name. So let us give it as Testkube bot, and it will ask which workspace do you want this application to be deployed. Now, depending on which workspaces you are part of, it will give you a list of all the workspaces, and let us go ahead and check one, in this case Testkube, and click on create app. The moment you do that, your app is created. So it's as simple as that to create a Slack application. So it has all the other details like app ID, client ID, secrets, which you can use while you are building or integrating some other things. But for this use case, our interest is in incoming webhooks, because this is where Testkube will send the notifications which would be passed on to the channel we just created. So navigate to incoming webhooks under features, and by default, these are turned off, obviously for security reasons. So we will turn it on. And the moment I do that, it gives me a sample curl request that I can post to a channel. But before that, I need to create a webhook URL. So let us go ahead and create a new webhook. And when I do that, it is actually going to ask me that where should this bot actually post. So in this case, we will choose a channel. And if you see, I see the Testkube webhook channel that we just created. So I choose that channel and click on allow. The moment I do this, now I'll be able to see that the bot is configured on this particular channel, and now it will be able to send messages. So this is what a sample curl request looks like. Now, if I execute this request, I will see I'll see a notification in my Slack channel. So with this, we have successfully created a Slack bot. We have configured a channel and we have configured a webhook. Now that we have our Slack bot and the Slack incoming webhook ready, let us come back to Testkube and configure the webhook. So go to the integrations page and click on webhooks and click on create my first webhook. So it is going to ask you a few things. The first thing is the name of the webhook. So let us name it as Slack. And then the second is resource identifier. So this is where you are going to choose the test or the resource which will trigger the webhook. So in this case, we just created a curl webhook workflow. So we will select that. And as I said earlier, we want the webhook to be triggered in case of Slack whenever it is successful. So let us scroll down and choose the event here. So in this case, it is end test workflow success. And then it is going to ask us what is the URL where the webhook is. So let us go back to our Slack application. And this is what we created, and this is the webhook URL. So we simply copy it, come back here and paste it and submit it. So that's it. This is as easy as it gets. We have created a webhook trigger. Now every time the test will pass, we will see that the webhook is triggered and a notification is sent to the Slack channel that we just configured. Now by default, we didn't provide any payload or text to it. So whenever the webhook will trigger, it is just going to send a blank notification sort of. So we will go ahead and add some custom text into the trigger that we have created. So let me just add it here, the custom payload. So let us look at what this payload does. So we are sending an item called text, and within it, we are having an alert. We provide the test status, the test workflow name, what's the name, what is the status, and then we provide a link to the logs that we have. And now what will happen is whenever this webhook is triggered, we will see that this exact message is sent to the Slack channel that we have configured. So let's go ahead and save this. And let us now go ahead and execute the workflow and see how our Slack integration and the webhook trigger works. So I go ahead and click on run. So here, if you see, it is executing and the test has successfully passed. Let us navigate to Slack, and here is what you see. You see the test workflow name, you see the status, and then you see the URL to the logs as well. So I click on copy link. I come back here, I paste it, and I should be able to see the logs of that particular execution. So this is what it did. Now let us go ahead and focus on Grafana incident as well. So let us see how to configure Grafana to receive notifications from Testkube. For that, you obviously need a Grafana instance. So you could use a locally hosted one, a cloud hosted one, or you could use their free Grafana cloud offering, which is good for building such small use cases. So I have a Grafana cloud instance configured. So all I do is I log into that, and then from the options on the left hand side, I navigate to alerts and IRM, and under that there is incidents, and then there is integrations. I navigate to the integrations tab. This is where it shows me a lot of integrations to different tools that can be connected with Grafana. So I choose incoming webhooks, and it gives me the details, the webhook ID, tokens, URL, etc. So in this case for us, the only important thing is URL for now. So let's copy this URL and then go back to Testkube to create the webhook for Grafana. So to create a webhook for Grafana, we'll again go back to integrations, webhooks, and we'll click on create a new webhook. In this case, we will give the name as Grafana. Resource identifier will be curl webhook workflow, because we want this webhook to be triggered whenever the curl webhook test workflow actually executes. And in this case, we will say failed. So whenever the curl webhook test workflow fails, only then we want the Grafana webhook to be triggered. So we click on next, and on the next page, it's going to ask me the URL for the Grafana incident endpoint. So the one that we copied right now, we are just going to paste, and that's it. So we now have the Grafana webhook ready to execute. But if you remember, in this case, the condition is failed, which means we want the test workflow to fail. So let us go ahead and modify the code. So I go to the test workflow, I go to settings, I go to definition. And right now, if you see, it's going to check if it's 200, it's going to pass. If it's not 200, it's going to fail. And right now we are getting the output as 200. So let us modify it to 400 just to fail the test workflow. So let us go ahead and save and run. The moment I do this, we'll see that the execution has started and it failed, because now we are looking for HTTP 400, but then we got 200. So let's navigate to our Grafana dashboard and come back to incidents. And the moment I'm here, there is an incoming webhook incident immediately because we had a failed test case there. And if you see here, it has given me all the details from the test workflow. It's created an incident with all the details, and if you go ahead and see here, this is what our test workflow command is. So if you remember, we changed it to 400, and this is what the actual command was, and it has dumped in a lot of details related to the test workflow. So this is how you can send a notification from Testkube to Grafana, and here is an incident which you can assign to your incident management team and then move on ahead with it. So that was a quick demo on how to use Testkube and configure various different webhooks on Testkube. For more details, do check out our blog post to learn more and configure it for yourself.